Hello, hello, and welcome back.
Hello, welcome.
Hello. Yes, good to be back with you, Teresa. Welcome to episode 14 of Living Richly with Curo. My name is Anne McCabe. I am the CEO and a partner here at Curo, and I'm joined, as always, by my amazing partner,
Hi,
Teresa.
I'm Teresa Roberts, COO and partner at Curo, and such a pleasure to be back with you today, Anne. Love these moments when we get to chat.
I know. It's great. Even though we work together, we work in different offices and our lives are so busy. This is like such a fun catch up time with you that
Yeah,
we get every week. So I'm glad that we get to do it.
yep, exciting.
Yeah. And we'll maybe get into your vacation ready mode. I don't know if
Mhm.
you're planning to share anything about that. Yes, yes. But today's episode is actually quite a challenging topic to talk about, which we'll get into in a moment. And we're calling this series "My Spouse Passed Away, Now What?" because there are a lot of things to consider if you find yourself in the situation where you are now a widow or a widower. And so we're going to get into some things to consider. And we have decided to break it up into a series. So today is the first part of our series. But before we get into that topic, let's do a little A team catch up.
Yeah.
So, how's life, Teresa?
Well, it's good. For the subscribers who are looking at us, you can see that my hair is different. I am in vacation
Yes,
mode. So,
it looks
inside
amazing.
inside joke is that when a black girl gets her hair braided, she's going on vacation. You can always tell the black girls in the airport that are going to someplace tropical. But so I'm excited. Just been in vacation prep mode, but then also it's still been a pretty busy work summer as well. So trying to balance the two, but I'm excited. So I leave tomorrow for Colombia um,
Colombia.
to spend a few days with some of my sorority sisters from college. It should be nice time catching up, reminiscing, and hopefully rest and relaxation, which is what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm so excited for you. So, what is the weather like down there right now? Because it's like 100 degrees here in the DC metro area. So,
Yeah,
I know it's going to be hot, but is it less hot?
I think it's less hot actually.
Yeah.
When I checked the weather last night when I started packing, highs were in the mid 80s. Some days it got up to 90. I mean, of course, there's rain kind of in every day, but that's how it happens, right? It showers around 2 o'clock every afternoon. So I actually probably will get some relief from heat, oddly enough, than what we're experiencing in the DC metro area right now, because it's been scorching hot where we
Yeah,
are.
it really has. I thought so. I thought so. And those afternoon rainstorms are so lovely, especially to
Yeah,
like take a nap or just chill out and read. I think it's like forced, extra
right.
relaxation time. So I
Right.
always enjoy those.
For siesta in the afternoon
Exactly.
rain shower. Yeah.
Yeah, because you'll probably be staying up later than you normally do and all that good stuff.
Yes.
Are you prepared? Is your body prepared for
No,
like going back to
no,
college
it's
times?
not. My body's not prepared. My liver especially is not prepared. Because they're already texting like, oh, let's meet at the lounge when we get in Miami, because that's like everybody's layover spot, sort of where we're all converging. I'm like, oh God,
Oh
it
yeah.
starts before we even leave the country. So
Oh yeah, for sure. But you're great about doing those like juice detoxes and stuff. So you'll be fine.
I
You'll be
have one
fine.
plan for my return.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I knew you had one planned.
Yep, hit the reset.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
let's deal with you, my dear.
Awesome. Unfortunately, I'm not going to Columbia. I did threaten to crash your party and just
I know.
come and pretend like I'm I went to college with you, but unfortunately, that's not going to happen. So, I actually have a little bit of a restaurant review.
Oh, I love it.
I know, taking some tips from you, who you're usually our foodie.
Yep.
So, this past weekend, as you know, was Wally's birthday. And
Mhm.
so we went to what is now called the Ordinary Hen in
Mhm.
Frederick, Maryland. This started as Volt, right?
Right.
Originally, it was called Volt. So it's a Brian Voltaggio restaurant. So it was called Volt, I think, originally, and then it turned into Thatcher and Rye for a number of years. We actually went to Thatcher and Rye as a team for one of our events, which was lovely. We got to meet Brian. Teresa had a major fanboy moment.
I
Fangirl, I mean,
so bad.
yeah, major fangirl moment with Brian Voltaggio. But and now it's the Ordinary Hen. So apparently Brian is moving to more of like a mentor sort of position with the restaurant, and so his number two chef, who's been working under him for 15 years, has now moved into the primary spot, and they're calling it the Ordinary Hen. The chef now is originally from West Virginia, so there's definitely like a Southern sort of comfort food vibe to it.
Okay.
Which, yeah, but the food was delicious. As you know, I eat a plant-based diet, so I started off with a delicious like fresh tomato and pesto sort of salad, which was so great. The tomatoes were like melt in your mouth.
Yeah, I was going to say it's great time for tomatoes right now.
They were delicious. And Wally started off with the side salad, which was great too. And then I had a pasta, and you know they're so good at pasta, right? I mean, they hand make their pasta super fresh. So that was delicious with some mushrooms. He had a pot roast, and I think he would probably, if he were here, give it like a 4 out of 5. I think he thought it was good, but between the whatever sort of cut of meat, which was very fatty, between that and then the mashed potatoes were like extra creamy, like extra butter, extra milk. He felt like that was a little bit too much, too
rich. And I could see
like it would have been good had the potatoes been a little bit less creamy and the, beef still been more fatty. So he said it was yummy, but anyway, it was cool. It was great. The cocktails were lovely. The service was great. I love Frederick, Maryland. I think it is just such a sweet little place to visit. So we had a great time. So I would give it overall, I don't know, 4.5 out of 5.
That's a rave review for a new-ish restaurant.
Yeah. I mean, I think they have the benefit of, the continuity of one of the main chefs is still there. But it's, it's interesting to see, especially watching The Bear, right? And just being able to see a little bit about the way restaurants work now in the kitchen, at least on TV. I don't know if that's really the way it is. I think it's a pretty accurate show, but it's cool to kind of see a restaurant that is completely changing its concept, because going from Thatcher and Rye over to more of like a Southern sort of soul food kind of thing, comfort food it's a different, very different experience. So it's kind of cool.
Good. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And always going to, especially once you said like Southern influence, I'm like, oh, could Anne eat anything?
I know.
It was nice that there were vegan options, or at least modifications.
At least one.
Right. So that you could actually have a meal and not a lot of, vegetables side dishes for dinner. So that was nice.
Yeah.
4.5 is a great review.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Yeah, you know how much I love going to a restaurant and ordering like steamed broccoli, like a rabbit.
Yeah, I don't like the drive to Frederick necessarily, but downtown Frederick is so charming, and I'll travel for good food. So I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So let's get into the topic of today, which again is around if you find yourself in the very sad and unfortunate situation where your spouse has just passed away, what are some of the things that you need to consider from a financial standpoint? And in our firm at Curo Private Wealth, we happen to work with a lot of widowed clients. And so we have a lot of experience with helping, especially the women in this situation through these sorts of very challenging decisions and this very challenging transition moment. So we actually borrowed this concept of the 3 stages of widowhood from a woman named Kathleen Real, who is a leading expert on financial planning specifically for widows. And she, I think, developed this idea of the 3 stages being number 1, grief, number 2, growth, and number 3, what she calls grace. So we're going to focus today's first part of this series on grief. So assuming that this recently happened, and what are some of the things that you should consider doing? And then what are some of the things that we really don't think you should be doing at this stage, which is when you really should be grieving. So Teresa, why don't you kick us off with one of the first things, or kind of step 1 of what we think people should consider if they find themselves in this unfortunate situation?
Of course. So step 1, you want to make sure that you have your team in place. And that is, I think, a combination of a team of professionals. So a financial advisor, an estate attorney, an accountant or CPA. It may even include a child, an adult child, someone who can be a part of that team to help you work through the part of losing someone that can be way more business oriented than emotionally oriented. But that also means that you should probably have a therapist consider as a part of that team to help you with the emotional part of it, because sudden losses can be overwhelming. And you want someone who can help you walk through it emotionally as you have to deal with the inevitable unemotional part about it that is usually around the business and the finances of losing a partner or a spouse.
Yeah, and that's one of the hardest things about this situation is you oftentimes just want to be able to grieve, right? Like a lot of times people just literally want to stay in bed or, stay in their house and really not do anything, especially if this came as a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
When we've seen clients who have been able to prepare for their spouse passing away, not that it's ever easy, but some of that grieving actually ends up happening before their spouse passes. And so when their spouse passes, they have been able to at least partly emotionally prepare themselves for the inevitable. But if it was an accident or something that happened suddenly, there's a lot of shock and perhaps anger, and of course, a lot of sadness. And so, one of the hard things is we do sometimes need to make some pretty important decisions. So that it's challenging. There's just no other way to put it.
Yeah. But having people around you to help walk with you through the process, I think is always a good first step.
Yes, absolutely. Having that support system, both financially and otherwise, is key. So the second thing we recommend that you do is to gather all of the essential documents that you are probably going to need over and over again. So the first is death certificates. A lot of financial institutions are going to request death certificates. So you're going to want to get a number of copies of those. And some institutions will require an original. So having multiple original copies of death certificates is really important. Social security card of your spouse who passed away, and then really understanding where all of the accounts were. Was there any life insurance in place? And where are all of your financial assets? Where are they held is really important. And this is where hopefully there was a level of organization prior to your spouse passing away. And this is really a PSA for all of us out there who have loved ones, is let's make sure that our stuff is organized, and that in the inevitable phase that we're all going to get to in our lives where we are going to pass, let's make sure that we can make that as easy as possible on our loved ones and not have them scrambling all over the place when they're also dealing with grieving.
Yeah. And it's, excuse me, it can be a relief, even though it's difficult, to know that you've had the conversations, where the pieces are when you need to start making that first step. And no one ever wants to talk about end of life. It's a very challenging conversation to have, especially when you feel young and vibrant and full of life, but things sometimes happen unexpectedly. So having as much of that organized and having as many of those conversations you can have while you're healthy and of sound mind with the people that are important in your life, I think just makes it easier for them when the time comes that you pass away. And you always want to keep that in mind. How do, these people are already going to be dealing with the emotional part of my loss. How do I make this part a little bit easier for them to manage?
Absolutely. So now that we've had our team in place and we've gathered all of our documents and are organized, what is typically the third step of what we recommend for people to kind of figure out?
Yeah, I think the next step is to figure out what decisions have to be made now in this moment, and then what things can be pushed off for a later time. Obviously, there are things that you just have to deal with as soon as a person passes, but there are other things that you should deal with, but can be dealt with later. And I think leaning on your team, especially of those professionals, can help you sort out which of those decisions have to be made now. Typically, those could be things, especially around income. If your partner was earning income in the home and the income changes, or if there's Social Security or pensions, those kind of things that are impacted that affect the household in general from an income perspective, those are things that you'll have to make decisions around fairly quickly. There are other decisions, though, like what should I do with their car? That might be able to be pushed off to a later time. And it's not something that you have to address in those immediate weeks following someone's passing. And can you think of any other things that you would say is an immediate decision?
Yeah, I think just as you mentioned with the income and the cash flow, just really making sure that bills continue to get paid.
Yeah.
It's really basic and it sounds, very simple, but especially if your spouse, your deceased spouse was the one responsible or was the one paying the bills, we need to make sure that your mortgage is continued to be paid, utilities, right? You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you forget to pay bills and then things are getting cut off just because, again, you're grieving and you're not getting some of these things done. So it may seem super basic, but let's just make sure that there's enough cash in the bank that you can access and that bills are continuing to get paid. The other thing in the short term, in addition to working with your estate planning attorney to making sure that the estate settlement process has begun, is you may be eligible for Social Security survivor benefits. So whereas neither one of you may have been receiving Social Security previously, now you may be eligible. So that could be some relatively short-term income and liquidity that could come into your financial position. So it is definitely worth understanding and looking into any sort of potential Social Security survivor benefits. The other thing is if your spouse had a pension, the pension payment will probably either stop or it will be adjusted, right? Because of the survivor benefit. So to your point, Teresa, that really falls in the income category. And then the other thing short-term that you want to look into is if your spouse was of the required minimum distribution age or the required minimum date to begin distributions, or your spouse was receiving RMDs or required minimum distributions from an inherited IRA, as the beneficiary, whether that's you or another beneficiary, those still do need to be satisfied by the end of the year. So depending on when your spouse passes, if it's January, you've got plenty of time. If it's November, then you've got a shorter amount of time to make sure those get done and satisfied before the end of the calendar year.
Yeah. And just to take just one step back to double click on bills getting paid, I always share this story. I think I've shared it with you before. Now, I have not lost a spouse. I have not been married, but I have lost a parent where I had to move back home and sort of assume the leadership of the household. And of course, I had no idea what all the bills were that were getting paid until my trash can was repossessed. So in my county in Georgia, we had to basically pay a third party waste management service to do our bulk trash. And of course, we had a trash can that, you would put out on the curb, pull back to the house. And one day I go to put the trash out and I realized the trash can is missing. So I called my uncle. I'm like, someone stole our trash can. And he's like, why would someone steal it? He was like, did you pay the bill? I'm like, there's
what
a
bill? There's a trash can bill?
But yeah, so to that point, I had no idea that that was a bill for us until the trash can went missing and I had to pay the bill and the late fees to get our trash bin back. But it's just one of those things, those just odd things that happen when you have to assume taking over bill payments and expenses in a house that you may not be aware of. So very quickly getting your arms around that, I think is pretty important and something you want to do as soon as possible.
Yes, exactly. So again, may seem straightforward, but if you don't know you need to pay that trash can bill, you're gonna be having some trouble putting the trash out. So
right.
Yeah, that's a very, very good example. So let's talk about one other thing that we do bring up to widows that I think is sometimes not talked about as much, and that's what is called the widow's penalty. So Teresa, do you want to talk a little bit about what that means and why we bring it up to folks?
Yeah. So in the year of your spouse's passing, you are still eligible to file your tax return as married filing jointly, which of course is going to give you higher standard deduction, higher income brackets for different decisions made around your taxes. So it's a limited window you have, but it might be an opportunity to consider things like Roth conversions while you can maximize those higher income brackets and deductions in that year, because in the following year, of course, you will move into a lower tax bracket, now having to file as single or head of household. So it's something you just want to consider. And again, having an advisor and a CPA as a part of that team who can help remind you and make sure you're taking advantage of those things if it's something that you're eligible for. It might be beneficial to you, because even though you'll get the advantage of the brackets, let's say a spouse passed away earlier in the year and they, of course, only have a portion of the year's income, you would have a lot more grace in those tax brackets and those deductions to take advantage of some of those things like a Roth conversion in that first year of your spouse's passing.
Yeah, and this is huge, and again, something that I don't think people really pay that much attention to. Personally, having been through a divorce, my spouse didn't pass away, but I also was not able to file married filing jointly anymore after our divorce. And I remember that first year, it was tens of thousands of dollars more in taxes just based on that one change. I just couldn't even, I'm a financial advisor and, I understood the way this works, but I was still shocked at what a huge difference it was just because of those tax brackets. And as you said, the lower deduction availability. So this is a really big deal. And this is where I think the advice that a lot of widows are given of not making any financial decisions in like the first year after your spouse passes away. This is where I think that is actually quite poor advice, because while we understand the need to be able to grieve and take your time and be careful about decisions that you need to make, we would not advise you to push off all decisions. Because again, there are some windows of time of things like that Roth conversion that are limited. So something to definitely keep in mind.
Yep, absolutely. And again, lean on the professionals in your life to help guide you through those things as well.
Yeah, exactly. And ideally you would have had this team in place before. I know that doesn't always happen and that's not always the case, but ideally you would have had your financial advisor, had your attorney or CPA in place before this happened, so you can reach out to a trusted advisor. But the reality is, I think the statistic that I've seen recently is 70% of women whose spouses pass away and they become widows, they actually change financial advisors, which I think is really telling, because they don't have that sort of relationship and that trust factor. And, you and I know this being in the industry, that a lot of times in a couple situation, most of the advisors in our industry happen to be men. And a lot of times the male financial advisor will communicate directly to the husband, completely ignore the wife. And so when the husband passes away, the wife is like, I don't have a relationship with you. I don't even think you have my best interest in mind. You don't even talk to me during our meetings. You don't even look at me to make decisions. So, why am I going to keep my money with you when my husband passed away? So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it's something that you and I at Curo are very passionate about. We say a lot that because we are women who have been through difficult life transitions, like you shared with, the dissolution of a marriage, me with the loss of a parent. We understand how important it is for women, I think specifically, to feel empowered in those moments. So even our clients who are coupled, who are partnered, we always want to make sure that the female partner is not the passenger, right? Not the passenger on the journey of the financial life of a household. So making sure that both parties come to the table just as informed, just as knowledgeable, just as respected and appreciated around their financial life as possible.
Absolutely, because the statistics are pretty clear that women will inevitably be at some point responsible for their own financial position, right? Whether it is through a divorce, whether it is through their spouse passing away, women have a longer life expectancy. So the statistics are pretty clear that I think it's something like 80% of women will be forced to make decisions for themselves in the future. So yeah, to your point, even for our couple clients, it's super important to make sure that each person feels heard and understood and respected in that financial partnership.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things to the what we don't recommend people do category, we've talked about the things that we think you should consider in the short term. But one of the things we generally recommend against is moving quickly to invest things like your life insurance proceeds. Like that's not something that you need to move on immediately. While we understand, we love the markets, we love investing, obviously, we believe in them, and we believe that you can get better rates of return investing versus in cash. But there are a lot of decisions to be made
Yeah.
after you lose a spouse. Things like, are you going to stay in your house? Are you going to stay in the area? What is your lifestyle going to look like moving forward? So that's typically something that we want to take more time with our clients on, is really considering what that new lifestyle is going to look like before we jump to immediately invest those life insurance proceeds. Because while there is the opportunity cost, what we don't want is too much money gets invested and then we go into a downturn in the market and now we're having to pull money out at an inopportune time. So that is something we would say, press the pause button and figure some things out first. Let yourself get through the grieving process, and then you can decide how much of that money should be invested.
Yeah. And I typically find that liquidity is your friend during any transitional period. When things are in flux and there's a lot that's uncertain and you don't know what the next phase looks like. Sometimes, of course, we always says that cash isn't always king. We've shared that before, but liquidity in those transitional phases can be helpful until you figured it out and things feel more settled and you have sort of your revised financial plan in place. So 100% agree. Don't rush. Don't rush to drop that check off. As much as your advisor may want to have it, don't rush to invest those proceeds just yet.
Yeah. And certainly if someone is recommending something like an annuity or something where you lose a lot of liquidity and there are high fees and the money is getting tied up, we would absolutely recommend against making those sorts of decisions in the short run. I oftentimes get asked, how long does that grieving process take? And I would be interested to hear your thoughts on this, again, having grieved. But what I've observed in my experience is I do think it depends a lot on how much advanced warning you had. So I do think what I have observed is the more immediate, unexpected the death, the longer the grieving process is, and perhaps the harder. And what I've seen is sometimes it's one step forward and then two steps backwards, which is very normal in this sort of grieving process. So I haven't observed that it's a straight line or that it's the same for everyone. So I think what I would like to share with folks going through this situation is try not to compare yourself to anyone else, and give yourself a lot of grace and give yourself a lot of patience and time and care and compassion to get through the grieving process and take as long as you need, right? Because I think it really is dependent upon a lot of the factors leading up to the death. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with it. I had someone describe grief to me when I was younger as love with no place to go. That's what grief is love that now has no place. Like that person that you would show that love and affection to is now missing. So you have this love with no place for it to go. And I think what it had been helpful for me, and even though it's been, 20 years, since I've lost over 20 years since I've lost both parents, I still think of myself sometimes as grieving, but it's different now, right? I think about it in a way where it's healthy, because there will always be moments when I will think of them, things that will happen that will trigger, but now they spark joy. Right now they fill me sort of with warmth. So I think it's a journey, and the first steps into that journey, that misplaced love feels painful. And then there's a space where that misplaced love now finds a place, whether that's inside you, whether you choose to share that love with others. So I think giving yourself the space to know that it won't always hurt as bad as it hurts now, right? And giving yourself the space to really just feel the feelings and absorb, go through the painful moments, because eventually I think it changes. And I never can put my finger on when it does. Right. And people ask me all the time, and I was like, I can't ever point to the moment where it felt better. it just does, right? You take one day at a time, one step at a time, one moment at a time, and then eventually something transitions, and the things that felt really hurtful and painful now make you smile, right? Which is, I think a weird way to describe it, but it's been my general experience of grief, is that it's just this slow process that evolves over the years.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. I think that's so key. And I think the point of letting yourself feel all the feels is such vital
Yes.
advice. I know for people who have lost someone and just wanted to hop over that grief and numb the pain and not deal with it, it always comes back to bite probably 10 times worse than it did if you would just let yourself feel those feels. So these are human emotions. When you lose someone that you love, it is very hard. It is very painful. It is also nature, and it's something that we all will experience. If you haven't experienced it yet, you will. And it's so important to just allow yourself to feel the sadness, to feel the anger, to go through the stages of grief and know that that is okay. It's normal. It's natural. And we all have to go through it. We can't skip over it. We can't numb ourselves. We just have to go through it. And that's the only way to the other side is through. So I think that's really important to remember. And it does get easier with time. It doesn't ever get easy, but it does become, your new normal. And I love the idea of it sparking joy and you thinking of your loved ones and just remembering the good times and the great qualities that they had, and make sure to continue to live with those qualities in yourself now.
Yeah, but it is a process, and you have to allow yourself to go through. Like I said, the only way over is through, or to the other side is through. So you just have to go through that process.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we hope this was helpful to anybody who does find themselves in this situation. You certainly have our condolences. And even though we don't know everybody who's listening in, we definitely feel for folks who are going through this experience. So thank you for taking the time to watch this, and we hope and listen, and we hope that it was helpful. So what do you have for a closing thought for us today, Teresa?
Yeah, my closing thought is about friendship and the importance of friends. I feel like I've been lucky enough to be surrounded with just a lot of friendship and love recently. I had my two best friends, one from high school, one from college, come to visit me this past weekend, and just having the opportunity to reconnect with them, to reminisce, to laugh about things that we did when we were young and dumb. It filled my spirit in a way that I didn't know that I needed. I mean, because of course I have friends here, I have a social life here, but it's something about connecting with the people who've known you, right, for decades and have seen you transition and grow. That was just been so warm for me. And then now looking forward to this trip with sorority sisters from college and having that opportunity to do it again. I just feel so fortunate to have that. So it's been on my heart just how important I think friendship can be in life, especially as a single woman, right, with no romantic partner in my life right now. My friends they fill me with so much love and joy, and I feel so blessed to be able to still be connected with friends, right, from when we were 15 and 16 years old. So, tell your friends you love them, reach out to them, maybe drop a text today if it's someone you haven't spoken to in a long time, because I think friendship is just so important and invaluable in life.
I love that. Yes. And you are so fortunate and blessed to have friends that you've had for many, many years. And that speaks volumes of you and who you are as a person. I'm not surprised at all.
Haven't heard of me yet.
Yes, that you have people who've loved you for a long time around you. Not surprising.
Yeah. Well, what's on your mind today?
What's on my mind is I'm not doing well with my word for the year at all. So my word for the year is space. Like I wanted more space to think and space to be creative and space in my calendar. And it's not looking good. It's no bueno right now. So the good news is we're just over halfway through the year. So I still have the opportunity, hopefully, to pivot and tweak. But my closing thought is just that. It's about the midway part of the year, slightly over the midway part of the year. Great time to think about what were those intentions. Maybe it was goals that you established for yourself at the beginning of the year, or maybe it was a word or a theme. And just take an opportunity maybe this weekend to think about how that's going. And if you're like me and you don't like how it's going, then, we've got a good opportunity to pivot and maybe try a little harder the second half of the year.
Yeah. And what I would just say to you about that is that I understand now, having known you for a few years, how important space is for you to be okay. So I would encourage you to be deliberate about it in the second half of the year, forcing yourself to create the space. You could do 10 things on Wednesday. Maybe you should just do 5. And
Yes. Looking at my day today, I'm like, whoo, no space, no space.
But yeah, so just if I could encourage you to just be deliberate, because I know you and I know that you need that. You need that time to reflect and to strategize even, right? You like that space to just sort of think and create. So I would encourage you to be deliberate about it. And then of course I'm here. Let me know what I can do to help you create some space.
I appreciate you so much. You always help me create more space. I can't even imagine my life without you. So. It would be completely bananas. Oh, my goodness. So, well, thank you for that.
Of course.
So that wraps us for this week. As we have a few reminders, please do give us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening or watching this podcast. Give us a review, keep it positive. We want to hear what you're loving about the podcast, what you're learning. And we also want to hear what is top of mind for you in terms of questions. So if you have a question that you would like for us to answer live on our podcast, send that question to podcast@curoprivatewealth.com. We are offering Amazon gift cards for folks who send in a question if we answer it on our podcast. So we're throwing a little incentive in there. It is Amazon Prime Day, so I'm sure you can use some bucks towards Amazon Prime Day. So please send in those questions. We would love to hear what's top of mind for you financially, lifestyle-wise, et cetera. And we would love to answer those questions. So thanks again for tuning in. We will see you, talk with you next week. And until then, ciao for now. Have a fantastic vacation, Atrisa.
Thank you so much. I'll bring you something nice back.
Ooh la la. Take care.
You too. Live richly.